What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to begin our 2023 schedule preview / projected records for the upcoming 2023 college football season. And we start with our projections with the Georgia Bulldogs. Here was a schedule for 2022 for this Georgia team. You look at their season, they went 15-0, winning back-to-back national championships, going 12-0 also in the regular season. Winning the SEC championship game as well as the semifinal, and pretty much just dominated the national championship game against TCU. This was a dominant team from last year, one of the most dominant Georgia teams I've probably seen in a long time. You look at who they play in the non-conference. They played against Oregon in the non-conference out of the Pac-12, and we thought that game was going to be a little bit tough for Georgia, but this team ended up just winning this game by like 52 points. It was not even a close game at all. That game was in Atlanta. We thought Oregon could challenge Georgia a little bit, maybe give them a little bit of a scare to start out the year, but instead, Georgia's offense just clicked in that one. And you look at the rest of their schedule, not really anybody too tough on the schedule. They pretty much dominated everybody else on the schedule. Kent State and Missouri games were both pretty tough, but, those were just, maybe some fluke games. Georgia was starting to get better, though, by that time when they faced Auburn in October, and they just pretty much rolled over everybody else. We thought Tennessee would kind of give them a challenge as well, but Georgia dominated that game also from the start. And you look at who they played out of the SEC East. Mississippi State, they played them, and also Auburn, which they play every year. So, yeah, Georgia's schedule was really not too bad last year. What would the schedule look like for 2023? And here's that schedule for Georgia heading into the 2023 season. So you look at who Georgia will play outside of the SEC East and also the non-conference. They'll play UT Martin and Ball State in back-to-back first games of the year. So they start out the year with two easy cupcake games, and then they'll play UAB on September the 23rd. And then also they will play Georgia Tech, which they play Georgia Tech every year. That's a rival game. Georgia Tech got kind of competed with this Georgia team last year. Maybe Georgia Tech will be a decent team, but like I said, it's way too early to tell of what these rosters are going to look like. But we know Stetson Bennett is already gone for Georgia. They're going to have to replace him. But overall, Georgia's going to have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball once again. And you look at who Georgia will play outside of the SEC East. We know they're going to be playing every SEC East team. And, of course, they'll play Auburn on September the 30th. That game is always played every year, so it's not like it's really played once a year or maybe like the next few years. But, yeah, Georgia will play Auburn once again, this time on the road. It could be an interesting challenge there for Georgia because Hugh Freeze coming in, but it's a first-year head coach, and, we don't really know what the team is going to look like for this Auburn team. And also, they will play Ole Miss on November the 11th. This will be an interesting game here. Interesting test, but it's a home game for Georgia, so it really shouldn't be any problems for this Georgia team. Ole Miss wasn't, Ole Miss was a decent team last year, but they kind of got inconsistent for the rest of the year. But let's go game by game now. So you start out the season on September the 2nd with actually two cupcake games to begin out the year for this Georgia team. They'll play UT Martin and Ball State out of the MAC. Ball State was a decent team last year, but I don't really think they can match up well with this Georgia team. Then they'll kick off SEC play against South Carolina on September the 16th. A South Carolina team that was really good last year. It could be even better because Spencer Rattler is coming back for another year. And it could be an interesting game, but the good news is Georgia gets this one at home. It was a blowout last year, though, when these two teams stepped out on the field. Then they'll play UAB after that, a really good team out of the Sun Belt. Should be probably an interesting non-conference game, but Georgia should probably roll over in that game. And then on September the 30th, they'll head on the road to face Auburn. Going to be a pretty tough matchup. Like I said, you got a first-year head coach, but we don't know what the roster is going to look like for this Auburn team, who's going to be their quarterback as well. But we'll get to more of these rosters. There's still NFL draft decisions still being on the horizon, and also, some coming back as well, production coming back as well for some of these teams. Georgia will play Kentucky here on October the 7th, and they'll play Vanderbilt here on the road on October the 14th. A Vanderbilt team that got better down the stretch last year. They were a decent team, but I really think Georgia should probably roll over in both of these games. October 28th, they'll get a bye week here before playing Florida here in Jacksonville. A Florida team that, I really just don't know what they're going to look like just yet. I know Anthony Richardson, pretty much, was a quarterback last year. He probably could be a better quarterback this season. Like I said, we don't really know what this Florida team is going to look like because of how they finished last year in Billy Napier's first year. And in the month of November, they'll play Missouri. Then they'll play Ole Miss here on November the 11th. Like I said, that could be a game that could maybe go either way, but it's a home game for Georgia. They probably could dominate. You never know. And then they'll end things out right here with 2 straight road games to end out the year. On November the 18th, it will be against Tennessee here on the road, and then November the 25th on the road at Georgia Tech. Tennessee could be an interesting one. This probably could be their toughest road game of the year for this Georgia team. From where Tennessee was last year, it's going to be a pretty interesting matchup. Yeah, Tennessee does lose quite a bit of production, on both sides of the ball, especially at wide receiver and also on the defense a little bit. But that's the schedule for Georgia. Not too tough of a schedule. I think this schedule really sets up nicely for this Georgia team to maybe win 3 national championships in a row. But now let's make a projection here for this Georgia team. This is the scale I'll be pretty much using throughout these projections when we pretty much, start them throughout this week as well. And if it's a 1% game, this means that Georgia's not going to be favored in this game, and also they won't have a chance to win it. But I think, you're not going to really see any red games on here for this Georgia team. 20% games, these are games where Georgia's going to be an underdog in, a couple touchdown underdog. 40% will be about a touchdown underdog. But you probably won't see any of these games here in the 1%, 20%, and 40% category. 50-50 games, these are pretty much games where I think can go either way. Some of them could be on here, you never know. 60%, these will be games where Georgia's favored by about a touchdown. 80% games, Georgia will be favored by a couple. And then 90% games, these are games where Georgia's going to win by more than 3 touchdowns. So we're going to start with the green games here, and we'll start with the 90% games. And I got 5 of those games. I got UT Martin at Ball State, the 2 cupcake games to start out the year on September the 2nd and 9th. They should both roll. They really should roll both in those games. UAB on September the 23rd. Look, I know UAB is a pretty good Sun Belt team, but I think Georgia should roll over in this game, and they pretty much will be big favorites. Vanderbilt on the road on October the 14th. I thought about putting that game in the blue, but Georgia's just way too talented for Vanderbilt's roster, and they blew them out last year, so I really don't see, Georgia having any problems on the road at Vanderbilt heading into that game. And then Georgia Tech here, it's a rival game. You never know what can happen, but I think, Georgia should be big-time favorites. And look, Georgia has owned Georgia Tech in the last few years, and I know Georgia Tech got better down the stretch last year, but I'm going to have to say that's going to be a green game for this Georgia team. So these are the games where I think Georgia will be pretty much favored in by more than 3 touchdowns. Let's go down to the blue games. Games where I think Georgia is going to be favored by about just a couple touchdowns. And I'm going to go with these 5 games. I'm going to go with South Carolina on September the 16th, Auburn on the road. I know that game probably should be in the purple, but let's be honest, it's just based off of how the teams were last year. And I just got to put Auburn here in the blue game here. But let's be honest, it's not over 80%. It's pretty much, close to that 79% mark. But I think this will be maybe a tough test for Georgia. It could probably change. You never know. But as of right now, I got to put it in the blue because, Auburn wasn't good last year. And right now, Georgia is the favorite going into this game. Kentucky on October the 7th. I also thought about putting this one in the green. But, Kentucky's got, Devin Leary coming in and also a former running back from Vanderbilt. So the transfer portal has been going good for Kentucky, and that could make this one probably an interesting game in the first quarter perhaps, but Georgia still should be favored in both going into these games. And then Missouri here on November the 4th, the Missouri team that got better down the stretch, but, I don't think they will be pretty much, having a chance here to beat Georgia. And then Ole Miss here on November the 11th. Like I said, this could pretty much be a game that can go either way, but I think Georgia will be pretty much a favorite. Now, if this game was on the road for Georgia, I would probably put it in the purple. But I'm going to go and stick with the blue game here for this Georgia team. So these 5 games, I think Georgia will be favored by about a couple touchdowns. Let's now go to the purple games. Do I have any purple games that Georgia will be favored in just by a touchdown? And yeah, that's the final 2 games here that I have here on this schedule, and that's Florida in Jacksonville and Tennessee on the road. Now, Florida probably could be a 50-50 game. It probably could be a game that can go either way. But as of right now, I got Georgia favored by a touchdown. And like I said, this is just based off of how the teams were last year. Like Florida was a decent team, but they weren't quite that good. They finished 6-7 last year, and they have a lot of question marks heading into this season, perhaps. So, like I said, we don't really know about the rosters just yet for this team, and it could be. I have to put it in the 60% range though. It could be a blue game, but it's a neutral site game, so that's why I had to put it in the purple as well. So, yeah, Georgia I think will be about a touchdown favorite. Tennessee on the road is pretty interesting. I probably could have put this one in the 50-50 games, but let's be honest. Every game that Georgia will play in 2023, they will be favorites. I mean, this is a hard team to predict against, and also a hard team to, pretty much, take them as the favorite going into those games. So, yeah, Georgia will be favorites all in their games this season. I believe they will be because, it's going to help them out from that national championship game. And pretty much I think they will be favorites, pretty much in all these games. But Florida and Tennessee. Tennessee, I think, is the toughest game on this schedule for this Georgia team. Let's say Tennessee gets better and Tennessee ends up beating Georgia at home. That could be pretty interesting. You never know what can happen, but I really see Georgia still being a favorite even though it's on the road. So when we look at this schedule and also the games that Georgia is favored in and games that are not favored in, well, they are pretty much favored in all these games. And now it's time to give you a projected record. So when I look at this schedule and all the games that they're favored in the green, blue, and purple games, the overall projected record for this Georgia team in 2023 is going to come out to be 12-0. I think that's an easy projection for this Georgia team. It's not an official prediction. I don't do my predictions until about the month of May, so I'm just starting to look at the ahead of the schedule, I should say. And as of right now, I got Georgia going 12-0 as the projection. Now, one loss could occur. I think the worst case scenario for this Georgia team will be 10-2. Let's say they lose to Florida or maybe Auburn on the road. Maybe Auburn could be a loss. You never know because that's always a tough place to play. Then you got Tennessee. I think that's the game right there they could potentially lose and go 11-1. But they will still probably make the SEC championship game because Tennessee probably couldn't make it there. So, but you never know what can happen. But yeah, as of right now, I got Georgia as the projected record of 12-0. That's my overall projected record for 2023 for this Georgia team. Let me guys know what you think about this projection for Georgia. What games will they be favored in? What games do you think that will be 50-50 games as well? Let me guys know what your projections will be for Georgia here. And pretty much we'll be starting to do these projections throughout this week. And the schedules are still trying to come out for, the Big 12 and Pac-12 and ACC. We still haven't got those schedules yet. So we'll get right to them, though. And stay tuned here for more on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.